we get rolling with this week's video, a very quick announcement to make. My 2018 portfolio box set is now available for pre-order. You'll find a link for that down below in the show notes. And also down below in the show notes, you'll also find a link for the Internet Archive version of my old website, which is what we're gonna be talking about today. Forgot to mention it in the rest of the video, but that way you can go back and look at what my website looked like back in 2001, because I'm gonna be showing you some of my old photos. 17-year-old photos, some of my early landscape stuff. They're not very good photos, but they're not also as bad as I thought that they would be. But hope you guys enjoy. What is going on, everyone? So in this week's video, I want to show you some of my old work. This is stuff that you guys probably have not seen before. And honestly, I really haven't seen it in a very long time, because the oldest picture you'll see on my website was from 2009. That is when I switched to shooting large format film as my primary camera setup. But before that, I did shoot a lot of digital stuff. But it was right about when I switched to large format film that I also started going on the solo landscape photography trips and started taking things a little bit more seriously in terms of scouting for subjects and waiting for the good light and all that. But before that, I did a little bit of kind of experimenting with landscape photography and kind of venturing out to some local areas. And I really started back in, I think it was like 2000 into 2001. So we're talking about, 17, 18 years ago. At the time, I was in my early 20s. I was going to college at San Diego State University. And I'd take opportunities to go out and shoot along the coast, because that was a really good local area to take pictures, and it wasn't super crazy crowded back then. I'm sure a lot of these same areas would be really busy now with lots of photographers, just because photography has really had a kind of a resurgence in that time frame. But at the time, I was using a Canon D30, which was a 3 megapixel camera. Count them, 1, 2, 3. 3 megapixels. It cost about the same that a 5D Mark IV costs right now. There weren't a lot of great lenses designed with digital in mind, because this is a APS-C crop factor cameras, but most of the good lenses were designed for full frame. But got some good lenses for it, worked with it quite a bit, and I learned a lot by driving down to the coast along the La Jolla coast and taking lots of pictures over there. And so I still have access to these pictures, because even though I've actually lost a lot of the originals with some hard drive crashes through the years, but I don't even really care that much about necessarily having access to the full resolution files. But I can go back in time with my website. There's this really cool Internet Archive website where you can type in any website, and there's a good chance that they've cataloged it at some point. So the earliest catalog date I have is from 2001. And this is when I'd been probably for the past, I don't know, maybe a year or so, maybe a little bit less than that, going out to the coast and taking pictures. So what I want to do is I want to show you some of these old photos from 17 years ago and talk about some of what I was doing back then and sort of my thoughts on that now, because I think it is really interesting to look back at your really old work, kind of see where you've come from, and kind of see how you've changed. And I gotta say, I wasn't as embarrassed by these photos as I thought I might be, but let's go ahead and take a look at them. So this is what the gallery page used to look like on my website, and it had several sections there: landscape and nature, architecture, wildlife, black and white, and other. And I found it a little bit amusing that the black and white section had 0 photos in it, and it still does after all this time. But I was kind of exploring a little bit, trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to photograph, and ultimately it was the landscape photos that really I found to be most enjoyable to shoot. So that's actually what I spent most of my time doing. That's what most of the photos you'll see on this website are from. But if we go to the landscape section and flip through some of the photos, you'll see that many of them are vertically oriented. I think that's the sort of thing that I was doing a little bit more back then, mostly because on the APS-C camera, I didn't have a particularly wide angle lens, since I was using lenses designed more for a full frame sensor, a film camera. And so I was doing a little bit more verticals in order to sort of get some more of the foreground in the shot. And now I tend to go a little bit more towards shooting horizontals. The processing on the files, pretty bright on the midtones, so I definitely have learned to appreciate the dark tones and the richness, especially in print. But I gotta say that some of these compositions aren't all that bad. I think I cooked some of the skies on them a little bit. There are some of the shots that are kind of cloudy skies that suddenly became purple for some strange reason because I made them turn purple because I just wasn't really happy enough with the clouds as they were. But some of the photos in particular, there's one shot here called Surge. And one thing I found a little amusing about this one is the description. It says, "This photo was shot in La Jolla. I'll add some more information a little bit later." And here we are, 17 years later, never quite got around to it. Also a pretty horrible looking watermark there in the corner. I don't know why I was big on doing that back then. Apparently I thought people were going to steal my pictures and use them for something. Maybe that's something that lots of people think when they're first getting into it. There's one photo called Glider Port, and that one, it's got this sort of interesting warm, cool balance thing kind of going on. One of the standout photos for me way back then was one called 3, which was taken over in Coronado, right out in front of the Hotel del Coronado. And there's these 3 rocks that were exposed and some light reflecting off the mud. And that was definitely sort of when I was learning that, you know, there's no substitute for having good light. And I knew that even though it was mostly a cloudless day, waiting till after sunset to get a little bit of that gradient in the sky, get some of that light reflecting off the wet mud in the foreground. I knew that would work out pretty decent. This other one here called Sunny Jim Cave. So there's this cave over in La Jolla called Sunny Jim Cave, and it's called that because the opening of it is in the shape of a cartoon character from way back in the day. But I found that these pigeons would fly out of it as they'd go out and do whatever they're doing for the day, and at a certain point one of them lined up to become the eye. So I was also thought that was kind of cool at the time. Then another shot called Evening here has this big kind of dome-shaped formation in the foreground with the coast in the background, and also pretty decent light on that. So I thought I'd be a little bit more disappointed with these shots and feel embarrassed by them, but they're not as bad as I thought they would be. Maybe if I were to look at the full resolution files, I'd see some really, really sloppy editing. But I think it's kind of fascinating to look back at your really, really old work and kind of draw parallels from it, kind of see where you've come and see where you're heading, and kind of get a little bit of a sense of direction by doing that. So that'd be a kind of interesting look back at some of the old stuff from 17 years ago. And yeah, things have changed a lot since then. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you around next week.